My guest today is Brian O'Shea, former U.S. military intelligence, senior consultant to U.S. agencies, and investigator for dailyclout.io. We discuss recent allegations made against him regarding himself as an operative for the deep state, who the deep state really are, and how deep it all really goes. Brian is a seasoned intelligence veteran and somebody with incredible insight on the current state of our political chaos. Stay tuned. Brian, how you doing, man? It's good to see you again.
Hey, Jason, always good to see you. Good to be back.
Yeah, dude, you and JJ have become regulars, and I couldn't be more happy about that because both you guys have so much insight on what's happening, not just in America, but I mean, the immigration and foreign influence is prevalent here in Canada too. So it's like whatever you guys uh, talk about on my show, it seems like it's either happening at the same time, has already happened, or has yet to happen here. But one way or the other, it's coming. So. Uh, I want to say, what was it, about a week ago? There have been, okay, let me rephrase this. There have been accusations against you of you being an agent for the deep state. Now, full disclosure to everybody who's watching or listening, I know Brian personally. We talk offline. If this guy's deep state, then you're the greatest spy of all time because you've fooled just about everybody. Can you talk about those accusations, where they're coming from, and how they happened?
Sure. And thanks for bringing this up. But look, honestly, no, I'm not a member of the deep state. Quite honestly, I'm not sure exactly what the deep state is because everyone seems to have a different definition. Is the deep state the intel community? Is the deep state corporate America? All of the above? Who knows? It's real. Um, so let me start. My definition of the deep state would be public-private partnerships that seek to profit off the misery of mankind.
Yeah.
Um, and whether mankind is the intent or whether mankind is, the unfortunate result of such a collaboration. That's how I would define it. Now, I started seeing these accusations, which was really strange to me because the majority of them, and there weren't many, but the majority of them were, well, I have found out that Brian O'Shea was in the intelligence community. And I'm like, well, it's on my LinkedIn profile. I mean, my Twitter handle ends with spy. I don't know really how much more public I could be about it. But what it seems to be is I mean, for the type of people these accusations came from, it seemed like it was more of an attack on my wife than on me. Now, I made it my fight because that's exactly what I wanted to happen so she can focus. She has a big important voice, and I'd rather they could go at me all they want. I mean, if they want to call me a spy, call me a spy. It's not true. I guess technically it is. I mean, detectives, I guess technically are spying on people, but then in that case, I guess everyone researching, the pandemic must be a spy too. But what I have noticed is there's two camps on this, okay? There's some that legitimately believe it because they're not well researched. And by well researched, I mean they've probably never met someone who's actually been in the intelligence community. And then there's the others there are right-wing grifters who want clicks and views, and that's very sad and I think very cruel to their audience because a lot of the audience in this new conservative media landscape, they work all day.
Mhm.
Okay, and a lot of them are not laptop class. So when you throw out these key words that they know are going to be alarming to people, they get views.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's what I've noticed is, and I've also it's a bit classist in a kind of weird reverse way where like it seems that anyone who has an Ivy League education, which I do not, I have my graduate education, I'm a master's degree and the subsequent ones below that, but um, or if you ever worked in the Intel community, you must be deep state. Give me a sec. That's the deep state. Um,
I
But
was gonna edit that out, but that stayed in. Please continue.
so that's what I've noticed just in this time is that that is how you get labeled deep state. Or if your voice on this, whatever you want to call it, the freedom convoy or the freedom um, battle, the freedom army, if you will, the Naomi Wolf's, the Brian O'Shea, the Jason James, the people that are speaking the truth and really just trying to get information out to people so they get off their dead asses and go fight it. What I found is that if those voices get too big or they're featured too prominently or they're getting a lot of bookings for podcasts, which, as you know, we don't get paid for. So
Yeah.
7 hours of podcasting means zero income.
Right.
But we appreciate it. We want to get our voices out
No,
there.
I get it. I get it.
And so the more well known I've noticed people become, suddenly there's kind of like the bottom feeders who want to call them deep state. Now, I'll end with this. One thing that's never happened, except for that recent interview, and honestly, because I think the interviewer kind of had no choice because he didn't expect me to loom onto his screen with my giant O'Shea head. Um, no one's ever called me and asked me. Like, no one's ever done normal journalism where they say, "Hey, I'm writing a piece on you. We have rumors that you're in the deep state or the CIA or whatever else." No one's ever done that. None of these journalists have ever called me. None of these journalists ever called Naomi. They just roll with it. And that's dangerous because it divides what we're trying to do. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, like in another setting, I could tell, despite my seeming rage on that interview, I probably would get along with that guy. I even said to Naomi after the interview, I said, I shouldn't say this, but I kind of like him. I just wish he wasn't so kind of sleazy and just could get rid of that.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of I could see where he's a likable guy, and that's really sad for me because you need all the friends you can get these days.
Yeah.
But we just need people to do things right because it's distracting and it's confusing to the people who rely on people like me or you or Naomi or Bannon or Peter McCullough. They rely on us. They don't have the training, the experience in a lot of cases, or the time to do their due diligence on us. So we do our best to be as transparent as we can about our backgrounds.
Yeah, and full disclosure, you are former U.S. military intelligence, right? You're a senior
Mhm.
consultant for U.S. agencies. You know, I I wanted to talk about this because this is I think part of a bigger picture, and this is what I think is happening. You know, for the last I don't know 8 to 10 years, roughly in there, I think we as a civilization, especially here in North America, but I would say the West in general, we've suffered a, a, a series of traumatizing events. And when I mean when I say trauma, I don't mean traumatic in a sense where like, oh, my dad didn't accept that I identify as a seahorse or whatever. I'm talking about real trauma, right?
Or a
And
merman.
right. And we have been beaten to death by the actual deep state. Um, Specifically the last 4 years, but I would say maybe the last 8 to 10. And I mean, I can speak for myself. I don't think I will ever trust my government or any of the institutions associated with it ever again for the rest of my life. I just don't think I'll have even the slightest amount of trust in any of them. And that's a very dangerous place to be, right? Because, there has to be a healthy amount of distrust for the state at all times. But to have no trust whatsoever and to always have your hackles up whenever you come in contact with the state, it's a very bad place, and I think that's where we find ourselves. So what people like this gentleman are doing is they're projecting their fear of the deep state onto people like yourself, because in their world everything is the deep state. Naomi Wolf is controlled opposition, and I'm sorry, but if she's controlled opposition, then they went a little too far with her, because I mean, if you've read the Pfizer documents, they're fucking horrifying, right? So if she's controlled
Mhm.
opposition, then yeah, they've gone a little too over the edge with that
For
controlled
saying she
opposition.
is, yeah.
Right. And
Right.
so, but I think what's happening with these people is that they're expressing the trauma that they've sustained in that way, in pointing the fingers at everybody who they think may have some sort of association with the deep state or US intelligence or something like that. And so it's flying way out of control. I mean, I've been accused of being a Fed on a daily basis since this podcast really
You.
started. Me, me in my
Well,
bedroom.
you kind of look like like an FBI sniper in that outfit. They do like the backwards hat,
You know what?
the black polo.
I've been a wearer of Ben Davis my entire life, and I was worried that if I wore this on the show today, I'd look too much like a cholo. But I'll take sniper. Sniper's better than cholo. Um, but yeah, so like that's where we are, right? Like we're in this situation where I think we're all managing this trauma differently. For myself, the way I manage what I've been through is through talking to people like you, and trying to build as much into this tidal wave of resistance and dissent as possible so that I can safeguard myself, right? At the end of the day, it is a bit self-serving, right? And then on the other hand, too, you have a lot of grifters in this space. And that's the thing, too, is like since this podcast has started gaining steam and building more of a larger audience, right? I've had a lot of people reach out to me like, hey, can I, do you want to talk on your podcast? I'd love to be a guest, so on and so forth. And then I start looking into these people and I'm like, oh, you're just a fucking moron who's using this as a platform to build your own profile and profit. Right. And yeah, of course, we all need to make a livelihood doing this in some way, but these guys are intentionally being hyperbolic and even lying in order to benefit personally. And I think the space is filled with those types.
I would agree with you. And look, there's another thing too. And okay, a couple of things, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Um, I think it's filled with those types. I also think that it's lazy. Okay. It's lazy to throw out accusations and be all animated about things. It's hard, as you know, to sit down and do the research, take some leads that people give you. We get a lot of leads people send, and we have to check every single one of them. Um, Verify statements. I do like what Naomi said on that interview because I thought it was very instructive, and I actually kept a recording, as you know. But I never thought like, what would I do if I had a guest that threw on an accusation about someone else who's not there? I never really thought about that scenario. And I'm glad she brought that up because now I know what to do. I mean, she's as much a teacher as she is a freedom fighter. And that was really valuable. I like that she said, no, you should have gotten up, gone to break, got a glass of water, which was kind of random, but kind of cute at the same time. And then come back and say, what sources do you have to verify that? And then if they don't have the sources, you cut the interview and you say, well, we're going to cut it right there because we don't like to talk about things without sources. We will have you back, but please bring your receipts.
Yeah,
And that's
and
a good way to do it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I listened to that full interview and she talks quite a bit about journalistic integrity, right? And
Been at it since '94 for major platforms.
yeah, I said this to you on the phone the other day, but I was watching an old episode of Ali G and she was on it. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah. And anyways, but I
He
think
handled
that's
that well, but yeah.
she did it. She handled that very well. I thought that she kind of clicked in halfway through her appearance and realized that, she was in the middle of something that she wasn't expecting, right? She was
They
very
actually
gracious.
they they lie to the publicists on both
Mhm.
ends. The publicist will get a note, just a quick sidebar, from this firm that doesn't even mention that show at the time. And so you think you're going into something different, and then you get there apparently, from what she's told me, and you're like, this weirdly dressed guy is there. You've never heard of him back then. I mean, today he couldn't do that.
Right.
And you're like, okay, well, she's an open-minded person. I'm not going to judge him by the way he's dressed for a news interview. And then you find yourself in this thing, and she did the right thing where she just got up and left politely.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, she laughed at the end, which I thought was great. She kind of took it in stride, right? But you know, eh, on the topic of her, because I think I said this to her in our conversation last week, but the way I look at all of this is I kind of weigh out what somebody has to gain and what somebody has to lose in all of this. And I guess
Smart.
in this space, right? And she, I think of all people, lost the most, right? She has been completely ostracized from her community. She's, been kicked out of feminism. I don't know if you can get kicked out, but she was kicked out of the left and feminism in general. And she has sacrificed a lot to tell the truth, a lot, you know? And so myself personally, I get kind of upset, not just because I have a relationship with you and I've talked to her on a number of occasions, but just for the simple fact that this is a woman who has sacrificed just about everything, her entire career and reputation, in order to bring people something that really she doesn't have to, right? And that's the thing that we have to remember. Nobody doing this right now has to do this. I don't have to do this. I could just work
Exactly.
in the corporate structure forever and kill myself at 50 because I fucking hate my life, right? I don't have to do this. We're all here, for a reason. And I'm turning this into a livelihood, and that's why I have guests like you on, because my message to people is don't trust me, trust the people I'm talking to, right? Because they're the ones who are giving their time and their energy. I'm actually
Mhm.
monetizing this, so you don't have to trust my opinion. But it
Yeah.
just seems like we're in this state of like permanent confusion and chaos, and who do you trust, who, and these guys come in and they label somebody like yourself as being part of the deep state, and it does nobody any favors.
Well, there's more than that, and look, I've got to say this. What these people don't realize is it puts my wife in physical danger. Okay, like actual physical danger. I was hired to protect her from her being accused of, being on the official opposition side against a whole country back in 2013, 2014, because she was stating her opinion about it. This is between Palestine and Israel. Okay. And it was people from the Israel side that came at her. And then, as it turns out, it wasn't even them, it were the grifters online who use these things as like test cases to do proof of concepts for SEO manipulation. And I found that it was linked to this whole network of bots and trolls out of the Philippines.
Wow.
Um, you know, so it was weird. But what I am saying, it does put her in physical danger because people don't know. People might think, oh, they might have just lost a child or something like that. And someone's saying it's a deep state is the reason your child died because they took this vaccine. And they see her and they're like, oh, she's the cause of the problems. And one thing I wanted to talk about too was you mentioned earlier people's reasons for doing this. There's another reason too that we're very empathetic to because it's not our first time at the rodeo. This was happening to her before the pandemic. I posted the attack by the Australian Minister of Energy, which was just bizarre. Um, but people will attack something they think they can touch. So I think what happens is people, like you said, feel hopeless. And people like the real deep state seem untouchable. They seem so high up that mountain that they'll never even hear me yelling at them. But someone like Naomi, who's down in the trenches and then getting on the stage and then down in the trenches, she's reachable, she's relatable, and in most cases people appreciate that because they feel like she's hearing them or they're hearing her. For people that are so consumed with fear and anger, they go at anything that they can touch. And I know this from when I was a private detective. So when I started, I had to start with domestic cases,
Mhm.
which I hated doing, but like literal divorce cases. So I went from doing like corporate intel, but when I started my own business, I had to start somewhere and generate income. And what would happen is it's pretty easy and it was a great practice for surveillance, but um, I would catch cheaters red-handed, men and women, like
Mhm.
red-handed, like making out in front of my camera because I'm in the back of a van behind a net like the one behind me, and with the license plate in context, date time stamps, GPS. You have to cover everything, and they'd get mad at me. They'd get mad at me, and they'd call me a liar. You had actors, I mean, some crazy stuff. And I'd start getting really kind of agitated. Well, later on, when I took on a larger client here in New York in the mezzanine fund world, like pretty big, the same thing was happening. This guy would start going off on me. I was doing reputation management. This is a big name too. And I'd start yelling back. And thank God for Naomi, because it was her that said, "Hey, don't meet his level of energy. He's hurt and scared." I mean, she's an angel. I don't have that kind of empathy all the time. I'm working on it, but for her to say that, even in the face of those type of things, really was an eye opener. And I realized, yeah, there's no way they can be mad at me.
Mhm.
They don't know me. And that's when I realized people are lashing out at whatever they can touch.
That's it. It's fear. It's, it's trauma, real trauma, right? I mean, imagine, think about what we just went through and think about not being yourself, right? I mean, Brian O'Shea, you're former US military intelligence. You understand how this stuff works. You understand how propaganda circulates, how
I
actual.
was in intelligence agencies after the military as well.
Right. And so you understand how people are manipulated by actual deep state propaganda. And so, but for most people, I mean, this thing, I mean, myself included, right? Like we got hit over the head by this thing. And I like to consider myself as being somebody of average intelligence, and I was looking at it, and right away I spotted that they were lying. Yeah, they're lying. Of course they're lying, right? The whole thing was silly. Arrows on the floor, locked in our homes, 6 feet distance, social distancing, paper masks that do nothing. And so I think for the first time in a lot of our lives, like I said, people of average intelligence, we were like being openly lied to and manipulated, and it wasn't even, there was no attempt to really cover it up, right? Like it was just, if you question this, you're the enemy. That's how it went. So for a lot of us, it was just like myself, I was like, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I can't believe what's happening. I can't believe what I'm observing here. And as more and more people like Naomi and Brett Weinstein and others stepped forward and said, hey, listen, this is like crazy,
Mhm.
it's like they just turned up the heat, and just we watched people lose their entire lives and get crushed in real time in front of us. And so
Yeah.
I guess my
Yep.
question to you is, who or what represents the real deep state in your view?
I mean, look, I I would look at the deep state this way because honestly, I don't really know. And I don't think anyone really knows because otherwise would it be deep? But
Right.
the I mean, right. Um, okay, so this won't really define the deep state, but it's more of, I would say, the deep current. And what I see from my research, my experience, is there is a giant fish who wants to, or let's say, let's liken it to the Game of Thrones. Okay. So you have the kingdoms are all fighting with each other for the, I don't know, what is it, the throne of swords or whatever it is. So they're all squabbling, for these bits of power. And I kind of liken that to um, countries in Western Europe and the United States, and also states, and then also political views all biting at each other. But meanwhile, from the other side of this imaginary wall, in this case, I would say the Great Wall, you have
Mhm.
these White Walkers, these zombies, or they're not even zombies, or these aggressive succubi, if you will, where they kill you and then they absorb you, and they absorb entire cultures, they absorb entire populations, and they're not stopping. They never disrupt their march. And then there's a few lone voices that are saying, hey, it's freaking White Walkers coming. We got to stop this. So that would be Jon Snow when he's trying to say, "Hey, we need to, the Five Kingdoms need to quit this." And I liken that to the Chinese Communist Party. But when you have a giant enemy like that, you're also going to have opportunists. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna, I guess, mix metaphors a little bit here, but it's like then you have the Gavi people and the WEF people and whatever else that most people consider the deep state. Now they think they're working with China. Okay. What they don't realize is they're working for China and they're doing exactly what China wants. And that's getting them into the European and Western European monetary systems. They're there now and into the ranks of power. I mean, I'm sure Dao Jinping, I think he was in charge when China got into the WTO, probably couldn't believe it. He's probably like, "Yeah, you're not going to believe this," because that really put them on the stage. We built them. Okay, we built today's China, today's dangerous Chinese Communist Party. They were almost gone,
Mhm.
and we built them. And so you see what they do. They keep spreading their tentacles into more and more of Western society, into our academics, into our banking systems, way into our technology because everyone uses their technology.
Mhm.
So the way I see them from a different, I love movies. So another way I see it is I believe due to hubris and also a lack of understanding of a different culture like the CCP, not like the Lao Beijing, the common folk, but the CCP themselves, which is a weird twist of Marxism and Leninism and Maoism and someone else's characteristics. But what happens is it's going to be like when Bane showed up in the third Dark Knight movie, okay, and that little guy in the suit, who I would say is the WEF or the Western power brokers. He's like, "Your plan didn't work, my friend. I've had construction crews around the clock. This is calling me millions. I am in charge here. And so then Bane puts his hand on the back of this little fella's neck and he says, "Do you feel in charge now?" And then he snaps his neck.
Nice.
So that's going to happen. Like all of a sudden, you know, when China gets right where it wants to be, when it gets its marbles encircling every single one of its enemies, and it does consider the WEF an enemy, even though it's a member of them. It surrounds them. Then all of a sudden, when they're like, "All right, let's have a big board meeting. We're going to invite our junior partner, the CCP, to the table." He's going to come in. He's going to say, "Everyone, get out.
Mm.
This is all mine now." They're going to say, "Hey, you can't do that." He's going to say, "Look outside," because he's the only one with guns. And that's what I keep telling people. And they're like, "Oh, but they control the banking systems with his technology." I mean, the thing is, it's a checkmate that I'm watching set up, or more like a finishing move in the game of Go, where he's almost encircled, and that game is about encircling the enemy's marbles. Every single one of the major obstacles that stand in the way of the 2049 China rejuvenation, which really translates into, we're going to rule the world. And they are nationalists. The only difference between them and other nationalists is they want they see that the whole world is supposed to be China.
Mm.
That's where they're heading. And for anyone not to see it, they're woefully blind, in my opinion. And again, these other, like I said, there's other opportunists, there's mercenaries, there's people along the way that will kind of swim alongside them and gobble up the crumbs. And that's kind of how I see things happening. But just all anyone has to do is pull the governance, the boards of directors of everything from the WHO to WTO to Interpol, and you see how highly positioned committee members are from the CCP. And it's like, come on, chess pieces are in place. It's about to be checkmate here.
Wow. Yeah. I
That's my
spoke.
deep state answer.
No, I think you're right on the money. I spoke to Sam Cooper. He's an investigative journalist here in Canada. He has a publication called The Bureau. He's fast becoming, the top investigative journalist. I mean, he is in my mind the only one who is like 100% credible all the way through. But he's been all over this Chinese entanglements in the Canadian political apparatus, and it is literally a scenario where you look to the left, you look to the right, and there's Chinese agents everywhere. There is no politician or political party that does not have some form of Chinese influence. And here in Canada, we have the United Front Work Department that is that's yeah that's involved in a lot of this stuff. Now you just nodded. Do you have experience, looking into them, and what have you discovered about the United Front?
So the United Front, for those that don't know, is really it is the overseas branch of Chinese intelligence who's sent to go keep dissidents and students and everyone in line. But it's beyond that. These are the same people that made the police stations, the illegal police stations in New York. These are the people that rumor has it, and I'm saying rumor because I don't have a source. I only have a word of mouth from a very top official, like maybe the top official. They were operating out of the Houston embassy during BLM riots, coordinating things. And that's why the Houston embassy was shut down. Active agents working in it. So they really are the aggressive CIA type mission of the Chinese Communist Party. And I have um, almost like indirect experience with that because when you well, I'm friends with a lot of people at the Epic Times, which one of my favorite publications and very good people. Well, that paper was created by the lead guy for the practice of Falun Gong, which is a peaceful practice of I don't really get it, but it's kind of like Buddhism type. So don't ask me to explain it. But these are I've never. These are all good people. These are all good people, and what happens is they are the number one target of you know the United Front, and the reason why is because they have been passing out the real history of the Chinese Communist Party via a 2-volume set of books. Millions of their followers all over the world, they know the truth because they've lived through it. And you'll see in New York, you will see people roll up to like an Epic Times newsstand. And I used to see this in DC when it was free, and I never got it back then. But they'll take all the copies and then trash them, or they'll harass people. I've heard rumors of them harassing people who go to the Ballet Shanyun, which is also banned in the China, and banned. China tries to get it banned from many, many cities in our country because it talks about the history of China before the Chinese Communist Party, and the Chinese Communist Party cannot have that. So the United Front, they are the forward arm of you know not only intelligence collection, because that's every Chinese citizen by law, but operations.
Mm. Yeah, they're all encompassing. That's basically the way Sam explained it to me, is that, what they do is that, there's number of Chinese just innocuous community organizations, or organizations that help immigrants who are fresh to Canada and the United States that, just need a community, right? And
Mhm.
the CCP co-opted all of these groups into the United Front Work Department. Now it's to a point where the United Front Work Department, I mean, is well, rivals the CCP in terms of scale and size, right? Because I mean, although it is
One,
the CCP, right?
yes.
I mean, it includes businesses and politicians and all the way down to, your grandma's mahjong, community group. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if I could clarify that a little bit,
Yeah.
it was something that went away when Mao went away. And it was Xi Jinping that brought it back. I believe Xi Jinping, or it might have been Dao Jinping. But the point is, it's a reboot, and it's actually in the organizational chart for the Chinese Communist Party,
Mhm.
for the Chinese government. It's right on their website, and they describe it just like you said there. And these are the people that make the police stations. But then there's the more aggressive, right from the Central Committee, and that is like I would almost call them like their SS, and that would be Operation Fox Hunt. Have you heard of this one?
No, please explain it.
It's going to blow your mind when you Google it after this. So Operation Fox Hunt, it's kind of like what happened in the 1972 Olympics with when the Israelis sent agents all over the world to drag people back to court. Um, totally illegal, but Operation Fox Hunt is the same thing. And for those who might say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, all they have to do is Google Obama and Operation Fox Hunt, And they'll see in the New York Times, I believe 2014 maybe, there's Obama addressing Operation Fox Hunt with Xi Jinping, and he's like, "Oh, that's very bad, Xi. Can't do that." And he's like, "Okay, I won't do that." He's like, "Okay, good enough for me." But then at the end of the Trump administration, the FBI arrested 9 Operation Fox Hunt agents, and these people kidnapped Chinese dissidents who the Chinese government has decided are wanted for fraud or whatever. Um, and they kidnap them, and they end up popping up in mainland China, and that's what Operation, so much so that, and the spin on Operation Fox Hunt in China, they make them heroes. They have action movies about Operation Fox Hunt, and they're like, "Oh, those sneaky foxes, blah blah blah." And you even have Bloomberg, covering it that way, like, "Oh, they caught more sneaky foxes, and this is back in the day." And I'll post some of these. It's just blew my mind. And so, you know, there's so many different moving parts of this. So when, back on the original topic, when people are like, "Oh, this person's deep state, this person's deep state, this person's deep state," well, it's kind of like, okay, you're gonna have everyone looking over there at the wrong people. Well, you American persons, vice citizens, are being abducted and illegally dragged to court, and our government is letting it happen. It's letting it happen. Bing Liu in Pittsburgh is a great example of that. I totally think that was an Operation Fox Hunt hit. He was the data modeler who made a big announcement in the end of April of 2020 at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center that he had new information on the coronavirus. I can imagine he had a model of what it actually was, which would probably reveal it was man-made. 3 or 4 days later, in like May 2nd or 3rd, this dude is found dead in his apartment, shot by another guy named Hao Gu, who's 12 years older than him. Hao Gu is then found outside, having committed suicide. Now, there's no point of intersection in the detective world. We always look for the point of intersection. Like, how would these two know each other?
Mhm.
There's no way they knew each other. Different fields of study, different professions, 12 years older. Hao Gu was actually running one of those centers for children and Chinese culture you talked about. In the tech world, this guy, Bing Liu, is in the, UPMC. And I started looking at that. And then the first thing I did is I went to the Pittsburgh police's record for clearing cases and closing cases. Do you know that was the fastest murder and or double murder, love triangle, which they said it was? That was their fastest case closure in the history of their police department.
Wow.
Because within 48 to 72 hours, the newspaper's like, "Oh, the chief is saying that it was a love triangle gone wrong." Of course, earlier reports from local papers, and I still have them, said they didn't hear any shots at all when that happened. So that, to me, is a classic, and they are both from the Chinese. They both came from the same Chinese Academy of Sciences, except I think Hao Gu was sent to go kill this guy, and then that was it. I should add that in October of 2019, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, UPMC, had just signed an $18 billion deal with the Chinese Academy of Sciences to manage 3 Wuhan-based hospitals from afar, I guess. And they'd also set up direct flight lines, direct commercial airlines back and forth to the Wuhan area. And oh, by the way, Pittsburgh happens to be the sister city of Wuhan, China.
That's just so, I mean, there's so much wrong in that scenario, right? And just the fact that there's a pipeline just to, sorry, just to go back and forth between Wuhan and Pittsburgh is frightening unto itself, right? That this relationship has been established. They're managing these hospitals in Wuhan, like you said, from afar. To me, that has all the markers of a well, an intelligence and money laundering operation like we've come to know the CCP for, right? And so how does this happen? And I know that that's a broad question, but how have they gained so much influence in North America? Like, is it just a matter of money? Is it just people who have a price tag over their heads that can be bought and sold? Or is there more to it? Are there people who are like ideologically committed to this? Like the thing that I keep having a hard time with is, you know, a lot of these people must know what they're contributing to. They must know they're contributing to the end of, whatever freedom exists in the United States and Canada. So what's motivating them to be part of it all? Just to have a seat at the table when the hammer drops?
I think for people new to it, that's what it is. But I think you hit on it, and that was a good observation. Ideologically, I think people have believed in this for generations. Um, because at the end of World War II, it was the U.S. that was telling the nationalist forces in China to work with and arm
The
Mao's
communists.
Chinese Communist
Yeah.
Party, which had been formed, you know, a decade earlier, but and they were getting beat down by the nationalist forces. They're almost done. They were pushed to Western China. But then we were the ones that kind of strong armed the nationalists, who
Yeah.
now they're Taiwan, into not only working with them, but arming them. And within days of the defeat of the Japanese forces. And of course, that was the fear mongers. You got to work together because the Japanese, and yeah, maybe rightfully so, but rightful fear, anyways. Within days, the Chinese communist forces turned all of their guns right on the nationalists, and it was just a bloody civil war that didn't last too long. And eventually, the nationalists were just destroyed. And we're talking entire countries, entire cities under siege, and then murdering the people as they finally couldn't take it anymore and were crawling out, and cannibalism in the cities caused by the Chinese communist forces against their own people. So, point of that is, if you look as far back as you can, you start asking yourself questions like, was McCarthy wrong?
Yeah.
Was the Red Scare real? And then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, why would someone be attracted to it? Well, you know, Falun Gong, and I partially agree with them. They will argue that this is the manifestation of true evil, the actual devil on the planet, the specter of communism, as they call it,
Mhm.
which it's hard to argue, given the synchronicity of everything. Um, but I also look at, when I really look at communism throughout history, really at the end of the day, it's just a damn monopoly
Yeah.
with a couple lucky few sitting at the head of the table living in insane luxury. Insane luxury. Like Xi Jinping's father's grave is the size of the town I live in. It's insane.
Yeah.
But if you look at every bit of communism or every communist structure, it's never what it's supposed to be. It's the few getting total control over the many, and not only getting control over them, because that's another thing I like to ask. Like, why would anyone want to control anyone? I don't like managing six people. They're a pain in the ass. Why would anyone want to do that?
Yeah.
But if you think about it, if you have everyone out there, smelting steel in their backyards and cutting down corn and then dropping it off in your food stores, we'll translate that into money and taxes and organs, human organs.
Yeah.
Um, Everything is feeding into you as that committee, as that ruling committee. So what I think what drives people is they think they're going to be, like you said, at that table, but there can only be so many at the table. And if China gets what it wants, no one at that table will not be ethnic Chinese, because
Yeah.
it can't be trusted.
Yeah. And
So
as
I
of
think people think like, I'll be the one, kind of like Squid Game. I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the one. But at the same time, then there's um, there's how you recruit people. So you asked how this happens with money. It starts at the bottom.
Mhm.
And if you look at every major espionage case, it always starts at the bottom. I used to recruit people in the type of corporate work I did to essentially legally tell me stuff about their companies for my client. And how would I do that? I wouldn't start by trying to, woo a CEO. I'd start with a parts manager or a nurse or a janitor.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to pump them for information, names, keywords, insider baseball type stuff. And I'm going to use that to to swim upstream and recruit that next person. Like, oh yeah, I was talking to Larry. He's on the Pink Salmon Tour golf tournament. I guess it's for all the best employees. Oh yeah, you know Larry. I know Larry. What are you working on these days? Oh, I'm working on this project. And you're recording all that. And you start swimming upstream. Now, how do they keep talking to you? You pay them. I used to say, like, you know, uh, I have a consulting firm. We're trying to write white papers about your industry. Don't really care what's going on in your business, but I'd love to learn more. Can't pay you much, about 275 an hour. So if it's not for you and you get someone else, let me know and I'll give you a finder's fee. They always call you back. And then once they get those first few payments, where you just let them talk about themselves, you've now engineered them to be comfortable with you and get paid. So there's that positive reinforcement. When you want to push them to get more stuff that they're uncomfortable with, that's when you drop the hammer. You say, oh, by the way, you've been working for the competitor and getting taken money for it. So I'd hate for that to get out. And now you own them. That's what every intelligence apparatus does.
Yeah.
You don't know who you're working for until you do, but then it's too late. So you could either continue on and make more money, or you could have your entire life destroyed, possibly go to jail or get sued. So
Wow.
you see, there's this evolution of these relationships. When you put out hundreds of thousands of agents, which the Chinese do, they're in every town. If you want to find the Chinese Communist Party in your town, go to the local chamber of commerce. That's where you'll find them. Go to the community colleges. There's more Confucius institutes and community colleges than Ivy Leagues. Why? Well, there's more community colleges, but where are small business leaders going to go take their night classes? That's where you make your connections, and then it always starts small and then they ramp it up. So in closing, my closing argument on that is, you want to fight this, do the same thing. Find them at the lowest level. Don't worry about Bill Gates and all these people. Yes, they're bad. Yes, they need to be dealt with, but you can't deal with them. No one on Twitter is going to be able to deal with them. Okay, Elon Musk might have a shot, but even he would be hard pressed to
Yeah.
fight the battles you can fight. Okay, and touch the people you can touch and kill the soldiers you can kill. Okay, just make sure they're not the good guys.
Stated perfectly from a deep state representative, Brian O'Shea himself.
You couldn't resist.
I couldn't resist. So
That's fantastic.
I got to get
Wait,
running here in a
are you
second.
deep state? You must be deep state if you know what deep state is.
You see that? You see that heart on the wall right there? That's a
I
deep
know that
state.
heart. That's a
That's a
deep
deep
state
state
heart.
symbol. It's a deep state symbol.
And you
My
have
wife,
the positioning and that pattern on your bedspread is Illuminati.
it's yeah. Well, the thing, my wife got that from HomeSense. It was in the deep state section, so that's how that ended up
Running a
there.
special after Christmas because they don't believe in Christmas. I
Yeah,
saw that.
right. 50% off deep state accessories. Um, so in closing, I want to ask just one final question. You guys have your election coming up. There's lots of fuckery going on in around this election. I mean, for obvious reasons, right? Now, I want to ask you, what candidate is there a candidate that is equipped to deal with this problem? And if there is, what do you foresee them doing in order to kind of stem the flow of you know um, Chinese propaganda and influence?
Donald Trump is that person.
You think so?
He's the only one with experience.
Yeah.
I mean, he went through the ultimate on the job training now to deal with even, the swamp and everything else. But he's dealt with it before. I mean, he's dealt with it before. Someone close to him was telling me a story. And again, it's hearsay, but it makes sense. Remember when he blew up the Iranian uh, general in Iraq? because he was in Iraq helping coordinate terrorist attacks against our soldiers. Well, there's a picture of Donald Trump that, the left and his opposition will always put up of him shaking Xi Jinping's hand. But of course, every world leader meets every world leader, so it's a dumb thing to put up. But if you look at that picture, Trump is kind of like, it almost looks like he's squeezing his hand, and Xi Jinping is kind of like, "Mm." And apparently, right before that picture was taken, Donald Trump, and again, it's just hearsay, said, "Oh yeah, I got you that chocolate cake with the dehydrated raspberry. That's going to be served up right after dinner. And I got you an extra helping if you want it. Oh, by the way, we just took out your boy over there in Iraq, so he's gone, and we leveled a couple of those Syrian Russian bases as well. So enjoy your dessert. Let us know if we could get anything else." And
Hmm.
at that point, and then snap, and then she's like, ah. But if you deal with it that way, because one thing Donald Trump understands, a, for a lot of these people it's business, and b, these people are savages. Okay, and you have to be a savage to fight a savage. Like, Donald Trump might not be the most eloquent speaker. Actually, I think he's a good speaker, but I don't really understand what people are looking for. um, but my thing is, I don't care if he can speak well. I care that he is a proven record of getting the job done and getting people in line. So who can deal with it is Donald Trump, because he knows that the Chinese Communist Party is driven by money. He knows that Mexico is driven by money, that Venezuela is driven by money. And he's transactional. Dan Bongino, mentioned this, and it made sense to me. He's transactional. That's why he can turn around and accept DeSantis's, endorsement. It's transaction.
Hmm.
That's not, for people who haven't been in business or run a business. It's very uncomfortable for them. They want Reagan. They want George Washington. America is a kind of a business itself. You need a business leader. It's a great country with a lot of great heritage and culture. I love my country, obviously, but it does run like a business. And he's the only one that really understands that. He looks at a budget and he says, why are we spending three times what we're making? You know?
Yeah.
And I see this in Malay down there too. So in Argentina. So what I like about Trump is that he's done it. He just told him, he's like, you better get those things out, because he's already blown up a few things. They know he'll do it. And he did that to Mexico too. He said, I want your army on the border keeping the immigrants from coming in and enforcing the stay in Mexico policy. The Mexican president said, "Oh, we can't do this." This is according to Donald Trump in many of his speeches. And he said, "Okay, well, have it done by 5, or I'm cutting off all of your aid and assistance." It was done. It was done. Not only that, they offered their airlines to and military air force to fly the existing immigrants out of the United States. But he gets that, and that's what you need. It's kind of like being a dad. You could be friends with other world leaders, like, Justin Trudeau and
Hmm.
Biden, when he can mumble a sentence. Try to be, and they want to be liked. Or you can be a leader and not care if people like you or not. You just have to care that they respect you and they will do what you say. And he gets people to do what he orders and what he says. And that's, in my opinion, what we need right now. You could taper that down once there's all the fires are put out, and maybe kind of balance it between, more, you know, uh, I don't know, diplomacy and everything. But for now, we're at war. Okay. And we need the guy that's not afraid to pull that trigger.
Excellent. Brian, I wish I had more time to talk today. I got a house full of sick people, so I got to get Advil and ginger ale ASAP. But hang around once we're done here, and we'll say our goodbyes privately. But for now, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Absolutely. Please find us every Monday and Thursday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time for Unrestricted Invasion with myself and JJ Carroll. You can find that at dailyclout.io/unrestricted. I also have a pre-recorded show that I'm starting to put content out called Mostly Peaceful, Investigating Beyond the Headlines. My Substack is Brian O'Shea, Investigate Everything. And then my Twitter is at Brian O'Shea, OSHEASPI. and my getter is Brian O'Shea at Brian O'Shea, and you can find me there.
Awesome. And yeah, man, it's always great to talk to you. I love that we get to do these
Of
conversations
course.
regularly, and it's an honor to call you a friend, on a personal level, and
Likewise.
also even happier to have somebody inside the deep state should I ever need some help. So thank you.
We have great coffee. We have great coffee. Come on over.